Namaste friends, Hari Om. This is Yogeshwar Shastri and welcome to the fourth part of the series on forced labor. Again, thank you for your response to the previous videos. In this video, we will be tackling the issue of forced labor for British troops in Bharat. And the following slides will make it pretty clear what I mean. So a quick recap from the previous videos. So we had an introduction to forced labor. We saw the use of forced labor for roads and for waterworks. In the next slide, I want to show you an interesting painting from the 19th century. So this is a really nice painting, and thanks to the wonders of the internet, I was able to get it off Wikipedia. So this shows the Bengal infantry of the British Indian Army on the march, and they are actually camping, as you can see from the painting. But if you look in the background, you see these camels, buffaloes, and miscellaneous people carrying loads. So it's 90% certain that these unfortunate people and animals were forced to work as porters, and most of the animals were forcibly taken from their owners. Now, what used to happen was, like the rest of the government machinery, the most atrocious use of Bharatiyas was to act as mules or donkeys for the British Army in India whenever they used to march from one place to another. And because the British Army was the sole means by which the British were able to keep their occupation in India, no complaints were entertained against the atrocious behavior of the military. So it was a law unto itself. And the military officers used to pressurize the local civilian officials, such as district magistrates, collectors, and get them to round up people to carry the military supplies while on the march. This was mostly free and in almost all cases resulted in severe losses for Bharatiya people who had to leave their occupation and work as temporary slaves. And in addition, they were also quite brutally treated, which I'll cover in the next video. Now, no Varna or Jati, or in modern day terms, caste, was free from this atrocity, and anyone at hand was dragged to work as beasts of burden for the British Army. So here's an actual quote from one of the British government officials. When detachments are marched under the charge of European officers, sometimes pressed coolies are paid and sometimes they are not. Again, the payment mechanism was very random. Similar treatment occurs when officers are traveling in consequence of removals. So these officials are the bureaucrats, so collectors, magistrates, revenue officials, and so on, as well as when other gentlemen pass through the country. Now, the gentlemen are the equivalent of modern day, visiting European businessmen or British tourists. So in one paragraph, you can see that people were being rounded up for the army, for the British government, and for random tourists as well. And this shows you how widespread the phenomena was. And this gentleman in the pic is the Nawab of Arcot in Tamil Nadu. His name was Muhammad Ali Khan Walaja, and he was one of the many two-bit Nawabs who sprang up with the disintegration of the Mughal Empire at the hands of the Marathas. So what happened was the Maratha defeated Panipat created a vacuum in which a lot of jihadis like Hyder Ali and assorted Nawabs feathered their nests. So there's an interesting tidbit from 1773 which shows that this practice was common right from the time when the British were fighting for military supremacy in Dakshin Bharata or southern India. A letter from 1773 from Sir Robert Harland to the Earl of Rochford, uh, where the where Sir Robert Harland decries the loot perpetrated by the officers of the East India Company in Arcot. But he also mentions an interesting thing regarding forced labor. The pressing of his people. Now, his people means the people who are subjects of the Nawab, to serve as coolies and their bullocks to carry baggage, which ought to be employed for the purposes of cultivation. So, farmers were forcibly taken off their fields, and their bullocks, which were used for tilling the fields or plowing the fields, were used as animals to carry burdens as well, or beasts of burden, are what would appear to be some of the Nawab's greatest grievances. So this was a very common practice. And here's something called a free lunch. Now, what used to happen was it was not only farmers or random Bharatiyas who were picked up from their homes and from their fields and their animals and bullock carts confiscated. It was also tradesmen. So shop owners, shopkeepers, uh, tradesmen like carpenters, blacksmiths, bakers, uh, almost tradesmen of every kind who were picked up to do free service to the British Army contingents. So occasionally, what used to happen was a right-minded British civil servant, a magistrate in this case, would protest against being made to forcibly impress Bharatiyas in order to serve the British occupation army. So one such honorable exception was the magistrate of Kanpur, who in 1843 wrote a strong letter to the commissioner of Allahabad division about the illegality of asking public officers to grab tradespeople whenever the military asked them to. He pointedly remarks that a majority of magistrates simply agree to whatever demands the military made in terms of forcing people. And the military officials, who are referred to as the commissionerate, refused to compensate the tradesmen who were forced to accompany army divisions on the march. And the military officials insisted that they earn their living by selling goods within the army camp. But none of the sepoys or the sipahis were ready to pay for the goods. They would simply beat these people up if they actually went asking for money. The magistrate's letter led the Lieutenant Governor of Northwest Provinces, which is today's Uttar Pradesh, to inquire with the commissionerate regarding the magistrate's accusations. So once things were put in writing, the British were a bit scared because they were very conscious of their self-image, even say 50 years down the line if somebody was to read these documents. So the commissionerate very flippantly replied, "We would suggest that the magistrate be advised that it rests entirely with himself to refuse compliance." And this is what the magistrate actually wrote. So usual course was for the kotwal of the city to collect all the tradespeople, and they were forced to make up a purse among themselves. So what used to happen was all the businessmen and tradesmen used to create a common fund, and they used to reimburse themselves from this common fund. So it's really their money with which they were paying themselves, which they indemnified an individual of each craft who was thus persuaded to go with the camp, because it was certain that they would not be paid anything and they would be brutalized as well. And here's a small list of the types of traders. So the magistrate actually lists out 34 different type of trades who were forced to provide services for free to the British Army. So just a few listed here. So atta and dal sellers, sweetmeat sellers, money changers, so hundiwala shops, so money lenders, pan sellers, or now this is all British pronunciation. So tamoli, uh, yeah, suji makers, bakers, there were blacksmiths, uh, carpenters, masons, pretty much every conceivable trade. And in the next video, we will look at the brutal torture meted out by the British troops, which in many cases led to deaths of Indians who were forced to accompany these camps. So friends, thanks for watching, and please remember to share, subscribe and like the video. Thank you very much.